Festive season is upon us, and one of the most thoughtful gifts that you can get for someone is a book. Or this season could be a reason to spoil yourself and get yourself a book. Hi guys, I'm Tess and I talk about South Asian books, films, and culture on my channel. And today, since we are all probably thinking about buying our loved ones or even ourselves gifts to celebrate the upcoming festive season, I wanted to share my own Desi girl gift guide to books. So my TikTok and Instagram pages started off predominantly as book talk and bookstagram pages. I asked my Instagram audience, what are they looking for in books this festive season to buy for friends or family? And I'm going to share my book recommendations for every submission with you guys in this video. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Hi! Could you recommend books for Bollywood fans?
So I love this question. I've had people ask me this question before because I am such an avid fan of Bollywood movies. There are a couple of really great books that I think Bollywood fans would love. The first is this book called My So-Called Bollywood Life by Nisha Sharma. It's a young adult book, but I loved it because of the plethora of Bollywood references contained in it. It follows the story of Winnie Mehta, our main character, who herself is a Bollywood film fanatic, and she believes in destiny, and the guy that she is meant to be with is her boyfriend Raj. But when Raj breaks up with her, she is completely lost, and then her fellow Bollywood film friend Dev challenges her to take her future into her own hands. Really, what's so special about this book is that Winnie's spirit guide is Shah Rukh Khan. There are these amazing passages in the book where if Winnie's confused or she's having a dilemma, Shah Rukh Khan comes to her in like a dream and he's there to help her and guide her. And for example, this is one of the passages from the book where she interacts with her spirit guide Shah Rukh Khan. Every interaction with Shah Rukh is reminiscent of some film or a scene from some film. So it's just such a thoughtful kind of book. The next book for a Bollywood fan would be the biography of Shah Rukh Khan by Anupama Chopra. Most of the people that I know are fans of Shah Rukh Khan, so I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you're a fan. But basically, the book is called King of Bollywood, Shah Rukh Khan and the Seductive World of Indian Cinema. And what I really love about this book is, even though it follows the life of Shah Rukh Khan and his career, the author gives us context regarding the state of the Bollywood machine during every era. We gain an insight into the world of Bollywood, advertising, and the ever-changing tastes of the audience, the influences of the political, social, and economic situation in India on Bollywood business during every era. And that's what I was really surprised by when I read this book. So I would say it's a really great book to understand these different eras of Bollywood.
I need a book to escape the daily routine. A book where I can escape reality.
This was such a great submission because I think it's so common that through reading, a lot of us really want to escape the day-to-day and escape reality. So I have the perfect book for you. In order to enter into a new world that is filled with adventure, romance, and drama, I always recommend The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi. This book was released in 2020 at the height of the pandemic, and I read it really to escape. And it follows the story of Lakshmi in 1950s Jaipur, who is a henna artist to the wealthy women of Jaipur. But there's so many plot twists and secrets in the story, and the story unfolds regarding Lakshmi and her past and her soon connection to her clients. So the second book in this series is also pretty good. It's called The Secret Keeper of Jaipur. I recommend you get that book as well if you buy The Henna Artist. And this year I read the third book in this series called The Perfumist of Paris. I was not such a fan of the most recent book, but I loved the first and the second book in this series. They're set predominantly in India as well. For me, The Henna Artist was the best in the series. I just want to escape into a fictional world, storylines and twists and turns. It's one of those like really good books.
Please recommend an interesting book on history. It's for a friend. Could you recommend a book on partition?
I wanted to deal with the history book recommendations together. So these were a few submissions put into one. Let's start with the book on Indian history. It is often forgotten. This is the book. It's called Kuli Woman, Odyssey of Indenture by Gautra Bahadur. The author is an American journalist, and she traces the story of her great-grandmother. During British rule in India, many Indians were duped into signing contracts of indenture, promising a new prosperous life in faraway places. It included places like Mauritius, South Africa, Guyana, and Fiji, to name a few. Reality was, in fact, completely different, and these Indian people faced unimaginable hardships and abuse at the hand of the British overseers in these places. Many Indians never returned to India as a result. And this is one of the most important books in my entire collection. I highly recommend that everyone get a copy of this book because it is a part of history that often is forgotten. The author sets out the history and her personal story in a very beautiful and moving way. The book on partition that I think is really poignant and very interesting is Remnants of Partition, 21 Objects from a Continent Divided by Anshul Malhotra. This book, Remnants of Partition, is a remarkable telling of the family stories hidden within items carried by migrants to their new homes in the new India and Pakistan. Amid the painful chaos and violence is the history of partition. The book is so powerful, and the author did release a second book in 2022, I think, being a continuation of the topic of partition, called In the Language of Remembering the Inheritance of Partition. To pick up a copy of this book, but I would definitely recommend Remnants of Partition, and getting these books together perhaps.
Hey, I want to buy a book for someone who doesn't like reading.
This is kind of difficult. I mean, why would you get someone a book if they don't enjoy reading? But let me see if I can help. I think if you want to buy a book for someone who is not necessarily into reading, get them a coffee table book. One of the loveliest coffee table books that I have is called Patterns of India, A Journey Through Colors, Textiles, and the Vibrancy of Rajasthan by Christine Chitnis. It's a beautiful book of photography and a visual journey of colors and patterns and textiles as a narrative. So if someone loves visiting India, I think this is a perfect book to kind of remind them of their travels in India and the beauty of India. So it's a great book for that reason. Another book that you can get is this book. It combines Desi art and humor. Trust No Auntie by the artist Hate Copy. It's a very fun book that was described as tongue-in-cheek guide designed to help you manage auntie meddling from someone who has been through it all. So if you want to buy a book that's completely unserious but contains fun Desi culture quips, then this is the book for you.
A book rec for my mom. She is into royal families and loves Princess Diana.
It's pretty cute because I feel like most Desi moms love Princess Diana and have such a connection to Princess Diana. The two books that come to mind. First is the memoir of the former Queen or Maharani of Jaipur, Maharani Gayatri Devi, called A Princess Remembers, Memoirs of the Maharani of Jaipur. This book is, of course, the Maharani's autobiography, so you really get her point of view to all the fascinating events that happened in her life. And her life was filled with glamour and drama, but I do think that, like most memoirs, the point of view of the Maharani is just that. It's her point of view. It has subjective thoughts and feelings may not necessarily be true to what was happening. It's her memoir and her point of view. If you kind of want to get more of an objective historical overview, this book that I highly recommend and I suggest you read together with the Maharani's autobiography, and it's called The House of Jaipur by John Zabriskie. The cover of this book is in fact a picture of a young Maharani Gayatri Devi. This book kind of takes you behind the scenes of the reality of the Jaipur royal family that we, the public, would not necessarily know. It includes the glamour, the jewels, and the palaces, but it also gives us insight into the real stories of tragedy and bitter family feuds over assets worth so much. This book reveals a lot of untold stories of life behind the palace doors. I did not know about most of the things contained in this book, and it paints kind of a larger picture of how the royals of India had to adapt to the social and political change that was happening at the time of Indian independence. Extremely well-researched book, and I will never stop recommending it, but I do think it's quite interesting to read these two books together to kind of get an insight into what a royal was thinking and historically what was happening.
Hi Taz. Any books that I can take on vacay? Something like a rom-com.
Oh, I love this question because there are 3 books that I think you may love. They are contemporary love stories, which I truly loved. First is What Are We Doing About Zoya by Anisha Bhatia. The book is set in Mumbai and follows the story of 26-year-old Zoya, who is being pressured to get married by her family. She agrees to her family's matchmaking until she is offered her dream job in New York City. This book is very light and entertaining, coming-of-age story as well. It kind of reminds me of those films that, I don't know if you grew up in the 2000s, but films like 13 Going on 30 and Things I Hate About You, it is kind of reminiscent of those films. It reminds me of those rom-coms that I grew up watching, which I feel like we don't have those movies anymore. The book that I'm going to recommend to you is a TikTok sensation. Dating Dr. Dil by Nisha Sharma is the perfect enemies to lovers book. Basically follows the story of our main character Karina, who believes in love and soulmates. She meets Dr. Prem Varma, who has views on love that are completely the opposite. Such an entertaining book. Kind of gives me Hum Tum vibes, you know, the movie with Rani Mukherjee and Saif Ali Khan. If you ever watched that movie and you liked it, this is the book for you. This book does get a little spicy, so it's definitely an adult contemporary romance read. I'm currently reading the next book in this series. I finally got a copy called Taste Like Shakar by Nisha Sharma, and it's just as entertaining. I love Nisha Sharma books. If you want to go and explore the books that she's put out, you will not be disappointed. The third book that I recommend in this kind of contemporary romance genre is The Trouble with Hating You by Sajni Patel. This is another enemies to lovers book, and it follows the story of Leah, who is happily single, but she has a painful secret that she has not healed from, and she meets this charming and gorgeous lawyer named Jay Shah. Office banter is seemingly turning into something more, but we kind of realize that they have to unpack a lot together in order to really fall in love. I love this book. I really adore the male character in it, Jay Shah. Despite being a contemporary romance book, it deals with some really serious topics that provides a mirror to many South Asian communities in order to reflect. And the character of Jay Shah, I kind of feel like he's such a green flag. He is like a protective green flag, and I love his character so much. He's probably one of my favorite contemporary romance fictional characters ever.
Any book recommendations that are Indian dance related for my sister?
I love this question because I too was a classical Indian dancer. I'm not sure how old your sister is, but there are 2 books that really come to mind. One for a young adult and one for an adult that I think any Indian dancer would love. So let's get into it. There's a book called Radha and Jay's Recipe for Romance by Nisha Sharma. It's a young adult book. Female main character is named Radha, and she's on the verge of winning the world's biggest Kathak dancing competition, and her dreams are shattered by a family betrayal. She then meets Jay, who is the captain of the Bollywood Beats dance team. They really like each other. Soon there are complicated family secrets that come to the fore that may derail both their dance careers. And I love that Radha is into classical dance, but Jay is into the Bollywood style, and they mold those 2 together in this book. It's just so special. I think any dance student would love this. The second book is a book called The Archer by Shruti Swami, and this book is set in 1960s, 1970s Bombay, and it follows the story of a woman who wants to be a dancer, a classical Indian dancer, and she faces a lot of difficulties as she grows older. And this book is really beautiful because it sets out how dance is where she feels her most comfortable and where she feels that she is in control and she feels like herself. It's a very immersive book, and as someone who also studied Indian classical dance for a while, related to a lot of her feelings on how dance was where she felt most comfortable and confident. She talks about ghungaroos, the music, dance sets, and the Hindu mythology that is associated in the storytelling of classical Indian dance. This book is somewhat tragic and thought-provoking, but it's a beautiful story on dancers and artists, how through performing they can heal themselves in many ways.
Looking for Indian mythology-themed fantasy novels, something like The Palace of Illusions.
Palace of Illusions is a book by a specific author, and she actually has a lot of other books that I think you may enjoy if you enjoyed The Palace of Illusions. She has a book called The Forest of Enchantments that comes to mind. In the genre of Indian fantasy novels, there is a book called The Jasmine Throne. It is an Indian-inspired sapphic fantasy novel. A princess and a servant of the royal household who has her own secrets becomes allies in their mission to change the course of history. Not a fast-paced book. There's a lot of world building in it, and if you love the Game of Thrones book series, this is a book that you may enjoy. Of Indian fantasy novels, there's a book called The Ivory Key by Akshaya Raman. It's pretty good. This book is actually a young adult fantasy novel. Again, it's inspired by Indian culture. In The Ivory Key, there's really a story of 4 royal siblings who come together in order to go on this epic adventure to find a mysterious key that unlocks a new source of magic. Very much Indian Indiana Jones vibes, but with a royal twist and 4 siblings. It's a really good book.
Any whodunits or murder mysteries?
Immediately came to my mind when I read these submissions are South Asian murder mysteries or Indian murder mysteries. The first one is the Bangalore Detectives Club by Harini Nagendra. Author has said previously that she is a huge fan of Agatha Christie style books, and this story is about Kaveri. She's the main character. She moves to Bangalore to marry Dr. Ramu. She kind of accepts that her life is going to be quite quiet after marriage, but all that changes the night of a party where she escapes to the garden for some peace, and instead she is an uninvited guest in the shadows. The party turns into a murder scene. When a vulnerable woman is connected to the crime, Kaveri becomes determined to save her, launches a private investigation to find the killer. I hope this book is adapted into a film because it's one of my favorite Indian murder mystery style books. Second murder mystery style book that I recommend to so many people is this book called The Widows of Malabar Hill by Sujata Massey. This book really sheds some light into the Parsi culture and community because our main character, Parveen, is a Parsi woman, and this book is actually based on a real-life woman. So a sequel to this book called The Satapur Moonstone, the third book in this series called The Bombay Prince, and every book in this series just as interesting and intriguing as the last. So I highly recommend picking up a copy of this entire series. They're amazing murder mystery books. There's history and community and heart, all of these books. So pick up the entire series if you are looking for some murder mystery books.
Any historical fiction books with strong female characters, please.
Anytime I get a request for a historical fiction book with a strong female character or characters, I think about The Last Queen. It's out the story of Last Queen of Punjab, Maharani Jinder Kaur. This is a beautifully written book. I think if you love history and, strong female characters, this is the perfect book for you. Another book that you may enjoy is a book called Lioness of Punjab by Anita Jarikarbanda. This book is a young adult novel, but I do think that it's so interesting that adults would enjoy it too. It's based on the Sikh woman warrior Mai Bago, who later was revered as Mata Bag Kaur. Interestingly, the publishers of this book, Diyali Books, and they are an independent publishing house who publish children's books with a focus on South Asian cultures. So definitely check them out online. They're called Diyali Books if you have kids to shop for this festive season.
South Asian books with LGBTQ plus representation.
So there's this book that I love so much and I tell people to read all the time. It's called Funny Boy by Sham Salvadorai. I've spoken about this book so much on my TikTok and on my Instagram. The story of this book is about RG, who belongs to a family of affluent Tamil people living in Colombo. She enjoys dressing up as a girl rather than playing cricket with the boys. And in this book, as RG struggles to come to terms with his own sexuality, Sri Lanka is plunged into a civil war, forcing RG towards adulthood and understanding himself. It's a beautiful book. I have recommended it for years. It's based on the author's own experiences and his own story.
Feminist book recommendations. Thanks.
Recently read a book called Woman in Wild, and it's a collection of stories on India's women wildlife biologists, and it's a brilliant book. It sets out how this field can be so challenging for women regarding the safety aspect, the gender discrimination and sexism that they face, lack of representation that exists. These women who are so passionate and committed to the preservation of nature and animals keep them going. There are so many noteworthy and fascinating stories of real life women in this book, but I think the story titled Turtle Girl hit different for me. It's really a tragic and inspiring story at the same time. Turtle Girl is about Jay Vijaya, the first woman in India to study reptiles and amphibians, and she focused at some point specifically on turtles during her career and documented the movement of turtles all over India. Interestingly, in order to complete her research on cane turtles, she lived alone for many months in a forest cave in Kerala. We get an idea of her brilliance in this passage from the book. Viji was totally at home in the forest. There were leeches everywhere in large numbers, but she took them in her stride. Drooling rivulets of blood on her legs didn't bother her at all. Another aspect was her immense stamina and physical strength, which was at times highly irritating as I puffed and panted behind her. So, and this has been pointed out by many others as well, her sense of direction was amazing. She seemed to have an inbuilt GPS which never let her down, even in faint torchlight in the dark. What's really tragic about this story is that she suffered from mental illness, and one day in 1987 she disappeared, and 3 months later news came that her remains had been found in a national park in India, and this was identified forensically by the police, and she was only 28 years old. Her cause of death remains unknown. Her legacy will go on. In 2006, a species of turtle was named after her because in her short span of field work, she published close to 40 papers in her field, and she proved that women could be incredible field biologists. She was a trailblazer and really a pioneer in this field, and I feel like reading about women like this is so inspiring to me. It's an amazing book to read. So the second book that I want to recommend if you want a fiction feminist story is Romantic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Bali Kaur Jaswal. Let the name fool you, this book has a lot of heart and a very important story to tell. I don't want to give away too much, except that it's obviously for mature readers. It's so much more than you would think. The title is very eye-catching, but the story, there's a lot to it. There's also a murder mystery included in this book. It deals with topics like ageism, cultural expectations for women, and the corrupt and damaging patriarchal standards that exist in most South Asian communities. It illustrates how these patriarchal standards keep communities divided and problematic. It's a fantastic book. This video, guys. I hope you enjoyed my Desi Girl gift guide for this year, and I hope you got some ideas for books that you should pick up for people in your life or for yourself. Please let me know any South Asian books that you particularly love in the comments below, so I get some ideas from you guys as well, and we'll see you in the next video.